running around and they're, hey, giving them tickets and that sort of thing, I think that's a very limited intrusion in our day-to-day lives that keeps more people safe than it not. So I think there's a little trade-off, but the little trade-off, the benefit is outweighs the risk that you have with it.
Man, but the idea that the U.S. government, which currently has the highest proportion of citizens in jail than even China, and is approaching the levels of Soviet Russia under Stalin, the idea that the police are somehow really concerned with drunk drivers and speeding tickets is to not even understand where the majority of police budgeting and force and incarceration is being spent. And there's ways to make sure that drunk drivers aren't on the streets without necessarily giving cops all of this power. I mean, private roads would make sure that they would do it. Insurance companies would take you to the cleaners if you ever got into an accident. And there's tons of different ways. You could have cars where you have to breathe clean to start them. There's 6 million ways that you can prevent this stuff without having to create this Stone Age monopoly of power.
Well, true. I mean, there are private means of controlling it, and I'm not against the private means, but however, from an American point of view, we've trusted a political or sort of a public version in some of these things, and that's the social contract that we have sort of designed for ourselves. We can reform it, we can change it, we can continue to improve it, make it better, as we have, and we don't have cops running around the malls. We have private security guards, and that's not necessarily that bad of a thing. There was a question, I think, and I'm going to sort of switch topics.
Property, unlike all the government-owned property where you need all these cops. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Fair enough. There's a question about CISPA and SOPA. I think that both of these are extraordinarily problematic. I think that the government's sort of bizarrely created relationship with Facebook and Google is extraordinarily problematic. It violates sort of our day-to-day ability to communicate with each other. At the same time, I voluntarily decide to use Facebook and Google. So I think that I'm subjecting myself to that. I don't have to use those things. So I don't really have a right to complain about this.
We have another question.
Yeah.
Steph, could you describe the transition into statelessness from peaceful parenting? Not quickly. Not quickly. The biological reality is that children who are aggressed against, and this includes spanking, it costs them IQ. It actually changes their brain. Their fight or flight responses become much stronger. Their neofrontal cortex, which is the seat of reasoning, and the deferral of gratification and the restraint of behavior that is the essence and foundation of maturity, actually shrinks. And these changes tend to be permanent. You can change them later on with a huge amount of work, but they tend to be for the majority of the population who don't have the time and luxury and middle class income to pursue therapy and self-knowledge. They tend to be pretty permanent. And you really, really want to, I'm going to make a strong recommendation here. This guy's been on my show before. He's Dr. Gabor Mate, Gabor Mate. He's written a book called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, which is his work as an addictions counselor and sorry, not an addictions counselor, an addiction doctor in Vancouver's mean streets. He goes into the foundational designing and wiring of the brain that occurs from the moment of conception onwards. What happens in the womb is incredibly powerful to how the human personality develops. And that the addictive personality, whether it's addiction to sex or drugs or power or whatever it is that's going on, the addictive personality is attempting to self-medicate a hole in the brain that's left through neglectful or abusive parenting, whether that parenting occurs before or after the birth of the child. And so if we, in a sense, have children, with good nutrition and calm, stress-free moms, and they're not subjected to spanking or hitting or violence or rape, of course, the prevalence of child rape in society is just astonishing, then we grow up with people who have little rage. They don't have rage. They don't have impulsiveness. They don't act out. They're not violent. They're not addictive. They're not self-destructive. They don't end up beating up their own kids. They don't end up getting in single-parent households. Their marriages are much stronger. Blah 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 blah. And so all of this dysfunction, which creates a vacuum for state power, is no longer there. And so if you have, say, 98% or 97% fewer criminals in the world, and 97% fewer people who want to run for office, is it really that possible to sustain the need for a state in anybody's mind? I'm here to save you from the criminals. It's like, I've never ever met one. I've never been subjected to one. I don't even know what they are. And it would be like someone selling you insurance for your slaves. If they ran away right now, you'd be like, I don't really have any, so I don't really need this service. And that's, I think, how we outgrow in a nutshell.
Well, that's a very interesting and crazy point of view. But however, I'm enthused by your passion by it.
Well,
There was a couple. There's a couple.
you do have to look at the facts. This is not just my opinion. This is actual science. So you can call it crazy, but all you're doing is calling empirical, validated science crazy, which is itself immature and ridiculous.
Apparently, I've just had too much fluoride water and aspartame, so I guess I'll continue to stick with that world. That's fine. Do I support an involuntary system of government? Well, this is a tough question, because how can you be a statist and logically support involuntary system of government? It's sort of a catch-22. If you're a statist, you sort of want everybody to be a part of it, and you want people to participate. So I'll try to make the point about this. With voluntary, involuntary systems of government, it's like this. I think that society is better with a draft than without a draft, because it forces the nation to be in what it's doing abroad. If you don't have a draft, then the nation can sort of turn its blind eye and let everyone else go off to war. It's one of the problems we have in America. I'm in favor of government mandates in terms of policies that look after the environment, that look after the way that we grow our food, the way that we do things. But they need to be good policies. And the problem is, in all too often, the people that get to decide these policies are controlled by people with corporate interests that end up dominating people and not having a good society. So it's a catch-22. There need to be reformed society. There needs to be an informed society, and we need a society that is working together. I guess I don't know how you can do that involuntarily. I guess to philosophically, I guess you kind of have to be, forced to do it, I suppose. Do we have any more questions? I just made all of Stefan's fans vomit with that statement, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the draft is in slavery in many ways, because the draft is forcing people to threaten to or actually murder other people, and you are forcing them at the point of the gun to do that. It is it's kidnapping and enslavement and brutalization, and it is. But this is where statist thinking leads to. I mean, this is where you can say, Jack. I mean, you understand when you say that the political system is a system that let's say we lived in the same country that you and I have designed for ourselves. I mean, it's completely not even close to the truth. I mean, it's not even delusional. I wish I could even call it delusional, because even the Constitution itself was a hidden secret document that was simply imposed upon the population with no consultation. They wouldn't even let the press in to look at the deliberations. And the idea that you and I have somehow designed this system, which indoctrinated us from at the age of 4 or 3 or 2 onwards, that we have somehow designed the system, that we're somehow responsible for the system, I can't see. And to justify pointing guns, I mean, you would actually say to my daughter, you have to come with me, and I'm going to fly you overseas. I'm going to put a gun in your hand and point it at people who've never threatened you. And if you don't do it, I'm going to arrest you. And if you resist arrest, I'm going to put a gun to your neck, pull the trigger, and blow your jugular out. Is astoundingly immoral. I mean, to look at me and say that this is what should be done to my daughter in your wonderful world is unbelievable.
I think, and here, Stefan, here's a check in the balance specifically related to military service. When we had a draft, we had there were escapes for people that if they were Quakers, if they were didn't want to do it, moral conscience, whatever, there's escapes for people like that. And what they did was, people that didn't want to go to World War II, for instance, there was people that acted as nurses and in military hospitals, or there were people that dealt with the mentally ill. There's all sorts of work that's great work that could be done that can be called by the citizens to participate with, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to go overseas and put a gun to somebody's head. There is a difference, but there's somewhere between the extreme over here.
Put a gun to someone's head. If I go work in some hostile guy who can go overseas and put a gun to somebody's head, that still doesn't take me out of the equation. Doesn't mean that what I'm doing is
anyways. They're going to do it anyways. So it's better off that the nation's engaged. I mean, my point here is that, I mean, they're going to do it anyways. So it's better off that the nation is engaged in what it's doing. What's that?
Sorry, you said they're going to do it anyways. I'm not sure what you mean. They're going to do what anyways?
The government's going to send our troops abroad anyways. I mean, there's no way to stop that. I mean, let's just be honest. The only way to stop it is if they didn't have the money to do it. But the way that the nation's forced to be engaged and criticize it is if it's forced to participate in it. I mean, there's something to be said that the government's force, the government's monopoly of power, bringing people into service, is a good thing for the country at large.
Yeah, I mean, you can wave around this collective good all you want, but you're still talking about putting guns to the heads of people and making them do stuff that they virulently do not want to do. And yeah, I agree with you. If they don't have the money to go to war, they won't go to war, which is why I oppose taxation as a whole. I mean, that's called the reduction of violence. Because you have taxation and you support taxation saying, well, now we need the draft because we have taxation, is to escalate the violence. Whereas I'm saying, let's defuse it. Let's not add more guns to the equation and then think that we've solved the problem.
Mm. Well, I'm certainly in favor of stripping the government of stupid funds for some of our foreign adventures. So I guess all in all, we may disagree about how society should be structured, how government should be structured, but we don't disagree that American foreign policy is extraordinarily problematic.
That is not where we disagree, Jake. It's not where we disagree on how society should be organized. That's like saying you and I disagree on whether we should have more airtime minutes or more cell data in our cell phone plans. You and I, in a free society, can entirely disagree about how society should be organized, and that would be perfectly fine. We disagree on whether it is morally acceptable to initiate the use of force against the peaceful. That is where we disagree. It is a moral line. It is not a question of yin versus yang or red versus blue. It is an ethical question. I will not cross that line and support the initiation of force against the peaceful. You are willing to catapult yourself across that line extremely well armed and land in ninja cat poses and point guns at everyone you think should do the right thing according to your plan. There is a moral distinction. I will not let you get off the hook by thinking this is some kind of a taste difference or a difference in how we approach things. It is a moral difference. You wish to use to initiate force against the peaceful to get what you want or to support the society you think is right. I reject that, and you may be fine with that, but I just want to be real clear to the audience that this is the difference. It is not a difference of taste. It is a difference of ethics.
Before we get into ethics, there has to be a foundational worldview. Our worldview is different. It's not our ethics is different. Your worldview is that people can live in society voluntarily and be peaceful amongst each other with sort of the right thought process and this sort of thing. I'm under the impression that no matter whether you have a government or you don't have a government, people are inherently flawed and they're going to, at some way, shape, or form, use force against one each other. And there needs to be checks and balances in society to make sure that doesn't happen. And so where I'm willing to use the government to step in is to create that check and balance. The
government will be run by the exact same flawed people who want to use violence to get their way. And how that solves the goddamn problem has always been beyond me. How you solve a problem called people are bad and want to use violence by creating a monopoly on force populated entirely by people that you say are bad and want to use violence to get their way is not solving the problem. And, I've yet to meet minarchists who will accept this, but it is a basic fact that it's really hard for people to get their head around. You can't create some fictional entity called the government populated by angels. If humanity is really good or has the potential to be really good, great, we don't need it. If humanity is really bad, you can't have it because they'll just use that. It's the ring from Lord of the Rings. There's no virtue who can overcome its power. This is what violence is. It corrupts human nature.
I don't see it as the world is ever going to be perfect, but I say that if with the government can create proximate solutions to insoluble problems, these problems that we have in our world can never be totally fixed. but we can find proximate solutions. And I think government has a better alternative than my worldview is that government, the absence of government creates more problems than government by itself.
And you are perfectly free to have that opinion. You just are not perfectly free to initiate force against me for differing on that opinion. If you want to have that opinion, fine. I would not use force against you. But that's what I need from people that I have debates with. And if that's not granted, then really I'm not going to even pretend that there is a debate.
Well,
because you're pretending to have a debate, but basically you're just saying, Steph, well, if you disagree with me, I'm going to force you anyway. So that's not a debate, right?
well, I would say that you're in Canada and me using force against you would create an international incident. So I will avoid that.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we've reached the end of the road of our conversation. I really want to thank the people who've been listening in, and it was a very challenging and stimulating interaction, to say the least. And I hope that people found it illuminating.
Yeah, I agree. And Stefan, I totally disagree with you, but I really respect you and your audience. So I just want to thank you for your time and the guys at Liberty Chat for putting this together. It was great.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ian. We really appreciate it.
We'll see you guys.